Welcome to Education Matters. I'm Michael Durso, President of the Board of Education, and your host. We begin today's show with a new segment called the Board Roundup. During this segment, I will ask my fellow Board of Education members to briefly review some of the actions, issues, and concerns facing the board and the school system. Joining me for this inaugural segment, I'm pleased to welcome Patricia O'Neill, Jill Ortman-Fouse, and Rebecca Smondrowski. Thanks to all of you for joining me. I'd like to start off with topics covered during our February 26 board meeting. Beyond the approval of the fiscal year operating budget, which we will get to a bit later in the program, the board adopted a resolution on safe and secure schools and communities. I know this topic has been of great concern to our community and to our entire board. I'd like each of my colleagues to briefly offer their thoughts on this. Rebecca?
Well, I just was really happy that we had the opportunity to take a position on the incidents that have occurred, in the country and in Montgomery County. I think it was really important for us to say something about what's going on, and so I was pleased that the board put together a resolution expressing our thoughts on the issues.
Jill, your thoughts on the resolution?
Yes, I was very pleased that we did a resolution as well, and that we were encouraging all of our families and our students to go out and show up for the March 24th march on that Saturday, where students will be coming from across the country in solidarity to stand up for safety in our schools. This is the moment in time where hopefully we can finally make a change. I'm also very grateful for our partnership with our police department and our schools, who are working very closely together to do everything they can to ensure safety and security for our students. One thing that the Montgomery County Police Department put out recently was an advisory to parents to make sure that they talk to their kids about social media, and that even if they post something that's intended to be humorous, it will be taken seriously as a threat, and it will be investigated, and there will be consequences. And every student needs to know that, and every parent needs to have that conversation with their students.
Yeah,
Thank you.
That's so important.
Pat, any thoughts on the resolution?
Like all Americans, we were shocked and saddened by the events at Parkland, Florida, and that we expressed that sentiment, but we also asked the superintendent to come to us with an additional plan for safety and security in our schools. We had already embarked on an evaluation of our high schools and middle schools and elementary, and we're also grateful that the governor in his budget has increased funding for school safety and security. We're not sure how that will trickle down to Montgomery County. But, in the spirit of continuous improvement, which is the mantra here in MCPS, we have to continuously improve and do better.
Thank you. I want to also take a moment to remind viewers of our board presentation on January 9th, where we discussed student wellness and intervention. Another issue of interest coming up is the naming of our newest school, the Richard Montgomery Elementary School number 5. It is our 206th school. Pat, would you explain to our viewers what the process is for naming a school and what will be happening next?
Well, we've taken our first step, and that first step is the board putting together 4 names to recommend to the community, not in a priority order, and then the local school community can add 2 names. The principal will compile a community panel, seek input from the greater Richard Montgomery community and come back with a prioritized list of names. The 4 names that we put forward were Mary McLeod Bethune, Emily Edmondson, Josiah Henson, and Bayard Rustin. So we put those names forward to the Richard Montgomery number 5 community, not in a priority order, and they'll come back and we'll gather input from that community.
Thank you. Another item, of course, is we are in the midst of the current legislative session in Annapolis. Board member Jill Ortman-Fouse has been very involved with that. Want to tell us a bit of what's going on in that session?
Yes, we had over 3,000 bills in this legislative session that were introduced, up from 2,880 last year, that cover a full spectrum of issues, including many of them being education related. We put together, as you know, a legislative platform every year that's pretty consistent year to year, and occasionally we make modifications to that platform about issues that we care very deeply about and that are topical. Our student board member, Eric Gersey, last year recommended that we add the issue of mental health, so that's actually a part of our platform now. We make most of our decisions based on what our agreed upon platform is, but there is legislation that comes along that sometimes is not part of our platform, and we need to make a decision one way or the other, either thumbs up, thumbs down, or sometimes we approve it with amendments, meaning we make some modifications to it to make it more acceptable to us. We appreciate that our legislators work with us on their legislation and ask questions. Generally, we support local control in terms of most legislation because we do believe that school districts differ in their priorities and expectations that are presented to them by their communities and how they do business, and that the state needs to defer to local control so that the local governing body, the Board of Education, can make appropriate decisions based on the goals and values and structure of their community. Sometimes we get legislation that sounds wonderful, but there is a substantial cost involved. And as you know, we are trying to use every dollar strategically as possible for the goals in the school district. And we appreciate when there's funding for something that we agree with, but when it's an unfunded mandate, it makes life very difficult for us. Also, there can be very good ideas around curriculum that our legislators have, but we have very full curriculum in our schools right now, and that we appreciate when our legislators take that into consideration. The Knott Commission, which was a commission on school construction, recently released their report and subsequent legislation, so we're going to be watching what happens with that, because school construction is a big issue here in this county, maybe bigger than any other county in the state of Maryland. And then the Kirwan Commission was looking at educational funding formulas, and it delayed its report because there was additional studying that needed to be done, additional input that they were seeking. So we're going to be watching the Kirwan report because it could have a very big impact on not only our school district but school districts around the state. We'll continue to monitor legislation and advocate for any bills that can support our students here in Montgomery County. The session ends on April 9th, and anyone who's interested can check our board website for our positions on particular pieces of legislation.
Thank you, Jill, for those insights. As our viewers can gather, a number of issues, of course, that we deal with both locally at the county level and also our involvement at the state level. Rebecca, what would you like to share about the board's consideration of the superintendent's facilities and boundary recommendations? Because that's coming up and getting a lot of attention.
Yes, it is, absolutely. We've had a lot going on, and as you all know, the board took action on the capital improvements program back in November, but each spring we have the opportunity to consider amendments to the capital budget. On February 26th, the board discussed the superintendent's recommendations regarding the 3 site selections based on the representative site selection advisory committees. First of all, there was the Clarksburg Cluster Elementary School number 9. The superintendent is recommending that the board select the Cabin Branch Elementary School site. Secondly, there was the Down County Consortium Elementary School site selection. The board discussed a lot of different options with that. The superintendent's recommendation is that we consider that we continue with the other projects that we had already included in the adopted CIP, and rather than going straight to building a new elementary school, and that we continue to monitor elementary school enrollment in the Down County Consortium and possibly consider a new elementary school in the future going forward. So, the third site issue that we discussed was the Gaithersburg Cluster Elementary School site selection, and the superintendent's recommendation is that we select the Kelly Park site to be the location of the new Gaithersburg Cluster Elementary School. We'll need to work with the city of Gaithersburg to resolve some of the issues with the use of this site, things like maintaining the ball fields, some forest preservation in the, towards the back of the site. I will be actually meeting with a lot of the community members from that area later this week, just to kind of discuss and hear from them what their thoughts are on that issue, on that site. We also heard updates regarding career and technology education at Seneca Valley High School. I think it's really important to note that the board presentation regarding CTE on December 5th as well as September 12th. We also received updates regarding performance space at Loiterman Middle School and the impact of the construction of the Purple Line, which that was a really vibrant conversation, and I felt really did a good job of keeping us up to date as to what's going on with the county work there and the construction of the Purple Line. And then I think the last thing that people really need to know is that the board is going to take final action on these items on March 22nd.
And CTE for people that...
Yeah, as I had mentioned, career and technology
just
education.
Just as a reminder to people, that's something that we're really focused on right
Absolutely, something that we've been working in close partnership with our higher education as well as our business community to try and improve on as much as possible.
I want to thank all of you for your involvement with this segment. I think also maybe our viewers, if they're not aware, need to be reminded that even though in this case board member Smondrowski and O'Neill represent a particular district, whereas Jill Ortman-Fouse is at-large member, all of us are involved with the entire county. We vote on issues that impact the entire county. We travel through the entire county. So sometimes that representation maybe gets a little bit misunderstood. That's all the time we have for our board roundup. I'd like to thank my colleagues for joining me today. I'd also encourage our viewers to check the Board of Education webpage for other upcoming meetings and events. We're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we're going to take a look into the recently approved operating budget for fiscal year 2019. Stay tuned.
Hey, mister! Down here. You illegally passed the stop school bus. I'm placing you in timeout. And this timeout means big fines and possible points on your license. And more importantly, you could have endangered students' lives. That's why, to curb this reckless behavior, school buses are being equipped with video cameras to help kids like me stay safe. So play it smart, play it safe, and respect the bus.
Welcome back to Education Matters. For our next segment, we will be taking a deep dive into the MCPS operating budget for the fiscal year 2019. Joining me to discuss the budget is fellow Board of Education member Jeanette Dixon. Thanks for being here, Jeanette.
Good morning, Mike. Thank you for having me.
Good. So, Jeanette, what did the board pass on February 26th, our last meeting?
So on February 26th, we passed the fiscal year 19 budget, $2.59 billion. And this is, as you know, probably one of the two most important things that we do as board members, approve the budget and also hire the superintendent of schools. And I'm really proud of the work that we did on the budget, because I think it probably was the most collaborative process that we've had, at least in terms of my memory of budgets, which has not been long. But, you know, as an administrator, I would watch this, you know, from the sidelines. And so I think we should especially say thank you to the superintendent who makes the recommendations, and then also our chief financial officer, Ms. Diamond, who just did yeoman's work on the budget.
So this time last year, you had just been elected and sworn in as a board member. How did the process this year, how was it different?
Right. Well, I think it was very, very collaborative. I certainly felt more involved because I was here from the beginning of the process. But, you know, essentially what happens is the superintendent makes his recommendations. And then, you know, we have work sessions, operating budget work sessions, where the public can come in and weigh in as well. I mentioned Nikki Diamond. She worked very, very closely with all of us as board members to, you know, get a feel for what we were thinking. She had a committee of stakeholders as well. And for the first time, we had a student member on the budget committee as well. And so all of that, you know, comes to the board in proposals, questions. We ask questions during the operating hearings, and follow-up staff follows up with answering our questions. And then essentially what happens is that, you know, it's proposed and we vote on it.
Yeah, I must agree with you. I'm in year 9 on the board, and I remember this year much more involvement, much more in terms of specifics and particulars, and the time frame seemed to work much better too.
Right.
The increases that we're talking about for the next fiscal year, what are some of the things they're going to cover?
Right. So we have an increase of, we're asking for an increase of 72 plus $1 million, which is, you know, essentially a 2.7% increase. And I also want to just say thank you also to Governor Hogan, because he did increase the state aid portion by $16.2 million. So I think that's very, very significant. But look, what the increase will cover, and the major portion of it obviously goes for, you know, the instruction of our students. So we have to have teachers. They have to be paid. We've had an increase in enrollment. We have 161,000 students. We've also added for some of our Title I schools, because this is really, I think, a student-first budget. We've added some additional funding for the Title I schools that would give them an additional, if they have over 650 students, would give them an additional 0.5 counselors, so they will have 2 of those. We added another consulting teacher because we probably will hire again about 1,000 new teachers, so we want them to have that support. And then, you know, the major portion of what the budget goes for, I think about 90%, is the salary and benefits for the staff. We have about 23,000 people who work for us. And they are, of course, the heart and soul of the work that we do here. So very, very important.
For the last few budget cycles, we've used the term strategic accelerators. Tell our viewers what that means.
Right. Well, what we're trying to do is what the superintendent says, which is when he talks about our students, all means all. And so he's put some strategic accelerators in there so that all of our students will have more opportunities. And some of the pieces that are involved with this involve career, technology, education. And I am really thrilled about opportunities for students, and they can also get licensures as a result of this. So in addition to their high school diploma, they would have a license to, let's say, with our aviation and aerospace program, they can learn to fly an airplane. We have a program in terms of leadership with the police, so that eventually, if they want to be police officers, they can do that as well. Cybersecurity is another big strategic accelerator, and also fire and safety and rescue. we're going to go back. We used to have that program years ago, but students who want to be a part of, the fire department in the county can do that as well. So that's really, really important. Other issues in terms of that accelerator, 2 of our elementary schools will have an extended year. Roscoe Nix and Arcola Elementary. They'll have an additional 30 days. We have the RAILS program for elementary schools to help with reading and math. And we've seen from last year that students made some great progress in terms of that program. So I'm excited about that. And I mentioned the counselors, mentioned the consulting teacher, and then we're also going to have 2 additional 10-month psychologist positions, which I think is really, really crucial in terms of the social, emotional, mental health issues that a lot of our students are facing.
I think most would agree that $2.59 billion is a significant amount of money. We are probably about half of the county budget. But there also was some savings in there, and I think our viewers probably need to know that.
Right.
Tell us a bit about that.
Right. So what Dr. Smith did, and he's been here now almost 2 years, so I think he has been able to, so to speak, get the lay of the land. And he realigned 75 positions in the central office to fully support schools. So the Office of School Support and Improvement will be realigned. They just had their interviews for associates and directors. So we cut the number of directors from 15 to 9. There will be 3 teams. And then he realigned those from enriched and accelerated instruction to be on those teams, and also the equity unit as well, and special ed as well. And so they will be working together as opposed to working, in kind of what people call silos, but to really meet the needs of our schools. And I think, we have to do some things differently. We want to improve student achievement. We want all of our students to have opportunities. And I think these realignments will do that.
So what happens next with the budget is it is a bit of a long process with a lot of benchmarks along the way. I mean, we as board members have approved the budget up to this point. What's next?
So what's next is on March 15th at noon, and I think folks who are interested can probably go to the Executive Office building of County Council. The county executive, Mr. Leggett, will present his budget, and that will go to the County Council. The County Council will hold hearings as well on the budget, not just our piece of it, but for the entire county, the other pieces, police, fire, libraries, and so forth. And then they will obviously, vote on the budget completely, and then it will come back to us. And so in June, we will take final action on the fiscal year 19 budget.
We frequently hear about MOE, maintenance of effort, and it is a difficult for some issue to define. What does that mean?
Right. That is really complicated, so I'm going to read exactly what it is. Okay. So local governments are required to fund their schools, and there is a statutory formula for calculating the amount known as maintenance of effort. There are other factors involved, but local governments must maintain their education funding effort from year to year on a per pupil basis.
So Jeanette, then, as we move forward with the budget process, how does this play out in terms of MOE?
Right. Well, it's really important because what we need to do and what the, law requires is that we maintain the current services that we have for our students. And so this increase that we've asked for, $2.59 7%, I think is very reasonable. And hopefully we'll get the support of the county council as well. But we'll know more when Mr. Leggett gives his presentation, his budget on the 15th.
So for those who are concerned about the annual increase in the budget, especially when there are challenging fiscal times, what are some of the drivers that cost or creates the increase in the budget each year?
Right. Well, I think enrollment is an important piece of that, as it goes up, because we do have a formula in terms of how much we spend per pupil. And so really what I would say to our community, Mike, is we really need your support for this. We are not asking for pie in the sky things. We're asking for what we need to educate our children, because that really is the most important gift that we can give them. And, it will make great citizens, as well, and be good for our country, because they will go about and they will do wonderful things, as students in Montgomery County do. And so if they have questions about the budget, they can certainly go to the county council hearings. I'm sure if you go to their website, they will have them listed. I know Councilmember Rice, the president of Montgomery College, Dr. Pollard, and Dr. Smith have done a series of, I guess you'd call them town halls that folks can go to. I think the next one's coming up at Kennedy High School on the budget, and folks can give input there as well.
So on the downside, if the budget is not funded at the request that we've made, what are some of the things that possibly could happen?
Right. Well, we're going to have to make some really hard choices, and that could it's really the superintendent would have to make those recommendations to the board, but it could entail a larger class size, and that's really something that we don't want to have, because I've been here now almost a year and a half, and then just from my career as an educator, I know that the lower the class size, the more students can achieve, because they have more of individualized attention from the teacher. And so I really think that lower class sizes are the key. I think they're the key to student achievement, to closing the achievement gap, and certainly that could be an issue. And then I think the other thing as well, we make contracts with our employee unions, and I know the superintendent feels very strongly about funding any contracts, and we haven't settled on those yet, but funding any contracts that we make with the employee unions. And I agree with him on that we have to honor the contracts that we make. So, we would have to reassess and possibly make more cuts that wouldn't be helpful, I think.
That's all the time we have for this edition of Education Matters. I'd like to thank my guests for joining me today. And if you'd like to make a comment about today's program or have ideas that you would like to share, please call the Board of Education office at 240-740-3030, or you can send an email to boe@mcpsmd.org. Thanks for joining me today for this edition of Education Matters. I'm Michael Durso, and remember, education matters.